We remember the past, not the future. Every moment of our lives depends on that asymmetry. Yet physics tells us the universe itself has no direction in time. The laws governing every atom, every photon, every field work identically whether time moves forward or backward. In the equations, the past and the future are equally real, but in the mind, only one feels accessible. That is the memory paradox. If time is not fundamentally real, why does memory move in only one direction? From a physical standpoint, nothing in the universe truly flows. The Big Bang was not the start of time as we experience it, but the low-entropy boundary of a timeless space-time block, a vast four-dimensional structure in which every event already exists. In this view, your birth, this moment, and your death are simultaneous coordinates, not sequential occurrences. Yet consciousness insists on moving through them, like a light scanning across a frozen film reel, convinced the story is unfolding in real time. The paradox is not that we remember, but that we forget we are remembering a universe that does not move. Memory seems to reveal time, but it may instead create it. What we call the past could simply be the direction in which entropy, the measure of disorder, increases. Our brains, built from thermodynamic processes, encode traces of lower entropy states and label them as before. The arrow of memory is thus the arrow of entropy. But entropy is a description, not a cause. If every physical law is time-symmetric, then the past we recall and the future we imagine are equally inscribed in the same space-time. The only thing that seems to travel is awareness itself, the observer writing history onto a page that was never blank. Memory begins as a physical act, the storing of information in a system that cannot stay still. Every neuron that encodes a moment, every molecule that holds a pattern, relies on thermodynamic irreversibility. To remember, a system must consume energy and increase entropy elsewhere. In that transaction lies the first clue. Remembering is not the opposite of forgetting, but the local creation of order at the cost of greater disorder around it. At the microscopic level, physics does not distinguish between forward and backward motion. If you filmed two colliding gas molecules and reversed the footage, no law would be violated. Yet in practice, we never see broken eggs reassemble or ashes reform into fire. This one-way direction, the macroscopic arrow of time, emerges not from the equations but from initial conditions. The universe began in an extraordinarily low entropy state, an improbable smoothness from which every memory, structure, and life form derives its sense of time. Our capacity to recall is thus not temporal, it's statistical. We remember because entropy rose. The brain, like any thermodynamic engine, operates far from equilibrium. Neural activity constantly dissipates energy, pushing information through patterns of stability and decay. What we call a memory is not a preserved image of the past, but a dynamic reconstruction, an energy configuration that persists because it resists noise just long enough to be useful. Each recall slightly alters the trace, deepening the illusion that the past moves farther away, when in fact, only entropy does. Look closely, and the arrow of memory aligns perfectly with the arrow of heat. Both are expressions of the same cosmic drift from order to chaos, yet neither proves that time itself flows, only that information does. The paradox is sharper now. Perhaps what we experience as the past is not behind us, but embedded in the universe's increasing uncertainty. The brain is not a clock that measures time. It is a prediction engine that constructs it. Every instant of experience is stitched together from fragments of sensory input and prior knowledge, forming a seamless illusion of continuity. What feels like a present moment is a neurological synthesis lasting roughly a few hundred milliseconds, a window where the brain merges what just happened with what it expects next. The mind, in this sense, does not pass through time. It builds the experience of passing. Neuroscience shows that memory and prediction are nearly identical processes. The same networks that recall the past activate when we imagine the future. The hippocampus, our archive of lived experience, also simulates what might occur, rehearsing, testing, refining possible timelines. Memory is thus not a record of what was, but a model for what could be. Time emerges from the brain's need to reduce uncertainty about what happens next. To remember is to forecast, and forecasting requires a direction. This explains why time and consciousness always flows forward, even though the physical universe does not. The mind's computations depend on causality. Sensory inputs become signals. Signals become perceptions. Perceptions become decisions. If the brain were to run backward, those causal chains would collapse into meaninglessness. The asymmetry of time for us is the asymmetry of information processing. The brain creates order by building narrative links, and those links must point from cause to effect. But here lies the deeper paradox. Our brain builds temporal order out of timeless laws. Each neuron obeys physics that is indifferent to before or after. The mind that feels time flowing forward is made of matter that does not. Consciousness is thus a localized rebellion against the symmetry of reality, a phenomenon that invents direction inside a universe that has none. In relativity, time is not a river but a landscape. Einstein's equations dissolve the distinction between past, present, and future, revealing space-time as a four-dimensional whole, the block universe. Every event that ever was or will be already exists within this vast geometric structure. The birth of a star, the flicker of your thought, the death of a galaxy, each is a coordinate, fixed and eternal. From this view, nothing happens. Everything is. What we call the passage of time emerges only from our partial perspective. Consciousness moves along a single line through this static block, experiencing each slice of reality as now. But that movement is not in the universe. It is of the observer. The mind's sequential awareness projects motion onto a space-time that does not move. The illusion of flow arises the same way frames of a film appear to animate, not because the pictures move, but because the observer does. The block universe erases every privileged now. The present is not universal. It depends on who you are and how you move. Two observers in relative motion experience different sequences of events, yet each sequence is equally valid. Before and after lose their absolute meaning. The paradox of memory deepens. When you recall a childhood moment, you are not retrieving something gone. You are aligning with a region of space-time that always exists. Physics leaves no room for a future waiting to unfold. Yet the mind insists on moving forward, compelled to build continuity from stillness. If the universe is a frozen tapestry, memory is the thread we use to trace a path through it, convincing ourselves that the pattern is being woven as we walk. If relativity freezes time into geometry, quantum mechanics shatters it into probability. At the quantum level, the universe does not exist as a single definite history, but as a superposition of many possible ones. Every particle's state, its position, spin, energy, remains indeterminate until measured. The act of observation collapses this uncertainty into a specific outcome. Yet that collapse has no physical mechanism. It simply happens when information becomes definite. In that instant, the timeless field of possibilities hardens into one experienced reality. Memory may be the brain's version of that collapse. To recall or record something is to extract one outcome from countless alternatives and mark it as real. Before we remember, the past is a cloud of potential configurations. After, it becomes a fixed history. Observation selects, cognition commits. The paradox is that this process feels temporal, though the quantum equations themselves are not. The Schrödinger equation is time-symmetric. It works equally well forward or backward, yet our experience of measurement isn't. Each act of remembering, like each quantum observation, imposes direction where physics sees none. Information theory hints that the universe is fundamentally a computation of correlations, not events. Entanglement links particles across space-time in ways that disregard sequence entirely, a connection outside the flow of time. If the brain, as a physical system, depends on quantum correlations to encode information, then our memories may literally be traces of timeless relationships, interpreted as before. Seen this way, remembering the past is not reaching backward, but choosing coherence among possibilities. Each memory is a measurement, each recollection a small act of quantum selection that stabilizes one version of reality. The arrow of memory is thus not drawn by time, but by information becoming definite. Reality, as quantum theory describes it, is not built from isolated objects but from relationships. Entangled particles do not possess independent states. They share a single, unified description. When one is measured, the other's state becomes defined instantly, not across distance but beyond distance, as though where and when have no meaning. This connectedness implies something profound. The universe does not evolve in time. It evolves as correlations. Every conscious being is part of this web. The molecules in your brain, the photons entering your eyes, the neurons forming memories, all participate in quantum decoherence, the process by which potential states become stable through interaction with their environment. Decoherence doesn't destroy superposition. It distributes it, locking vast numbers of possibilities into a consistent classical world. That consistency is what we call the shared now. Time appears to flow because our entangled states evolve together, collapsing into patterns that maintain agreement among observers. In this sense, the timeline is a collective illusion generated by correlation. You and I remember the same sequence of events, not because time itself moves forward, but because the information that defines us is entangled within the same thermodynamic gradient. Memory synchronization, the fact that the past seems identical for everyone, is simply entanglement expressed at macroscopic scale. The paradox is staggering. What we experience as linear history might just be the universe's method of preserving coherence. The flow of time is not a universal current, but a networked consensus, a continuous realignment of entangled information creating the appearance of progression. The cosmos does not remember what happened. It is what happened, all at once, everywhere. In physics, an observer is not a person. It is any system that registers information. But when that observer becomes conscious, something extraordinary happens. Awareness turns observation into experience. The universe may contain every moment already, yet only through consciousness does one slice become now. The act of awareness carves motion from stillness. It is the self that generates sequence. Neuroscience shows that perception does not arrive instantaneously. Signals from sight, sound, and touch reach the brain at different speeds, yet consciousness fuses them into a single, continuous present. This integration takes roughly half a second, meaning the now you feel is already the immediate past. A reconstruction delayed by neural processing. The present moment, then, is a hallucination stitched together to maintain continuity. Awareness does not perceive time. It creates the illusion that time is perceivable. The observer, in quantum and psychological terms, performs the same function, reducing uncertainty. When you focus attention, you collapse possibilities into definiteness. When you remember, you reinforce a pattern that defines who you are. The continuity of self, the story that says I, is built from this recursive act of observing the observer. Consciousness becomes the mechanism that binds the timeless into narrative form. But here the paradox tightens. The self that experiences time is not in time. Awareness does not unfold. It illuminates unfolding. The witness behind every memory does not age with its memories. It simply watches the sequence of change and calls that watching life. Time, from the perspective of consciousness, is not what passes. It is what is noticed. The universe does not move. The act of noticing gives movement meaning. Identity feels permanent, yet it is built from fragments that never stay the same. Each memory we hold is reconstructed every time we recall it, subtly altered by context, emotion, and expectation. Neuroscience confirms, remembering is not playback, it is rewriting. Every recollection overwrites the neural trace it came from, meaning that the you who remembers is not the same as the one who lived the event. Continuity, then, is not stored in the brain. It is manufactured by the act of constant revision. The self is not a container of memories. It is the motion of remembering itself. This constant reconstruction creates the illusion of a stable identity moving through time. Each updated memory preserves coherence with the last, forming a narrative that appears to flow forward. The mind's first priority is not accuracy, but consistency. Contradictions between old and new information are resolved by reshaping the past to fit the present. That recursive correction gives rise to a linear life story, but beneath it lies no fixed thread, only a sequence of self-consistent edits. The arrow of the self aligns perfectly with the arrow of memory. Both exist because entropy, information, and survival favor structure that anticipates change. From a physical standpoint, what we call me is simply a cluster of informational states maintaining internal correlations. Those correlations persist only as long as energy flows through the system. When metabolism stops, the pattern dissolves, and the sense of continuity ends. But consciousness, while anchored in that biological process, experiences the pattern as enduring substance. We feel like observers moving through time because each moment contains a memory of the last. Yet the observer is nothing but that chain of contained memories. The mind invents a traveler to justify the existence of a journey. Philosophically, this turns the paradox inward. If time is an illusion and memory constructs identity, then who is it that experiences either? The self becomes a feedback loop, a system that mistakes the persistence of information for the passage of existence. We are not entities in time, but temporal patterns experienced from within. The shocking implication is that identity is the mechanism by which timeless matter experiences duration. Memory does not just record life, it is life, moment by moment, arranging stillness into sequence so that the universe can say, through us, I am becoming. If memory builds the illusion of continuity, forgetting preserves its meaning. A mind that remembered everything would cease to experience time at all. Without selection and loss, every moment would coexist equally, and consciousness would collapse into a timeless blur. Forgetting, paradoxically, is what allows sequence to exist. It creates absence, the gap into which the next moment can appear. From a neurological perspective, forgetting is not failure but function. The brain is not an archive, it is an adaptive filter. Synaptic connections decay, memories fade, and interference erases detail. Not by accident, but to free energy and bandwidth for new predictions. Entropy demands that old patterns dissolve so that new configurations can emerge. Each act of forgetting increases disorder locally, but it maintains flexibility globally. Without that turnover, the mind would crystallize into stasis, perfectly preserved, but incapable of change. In thermodynamic terms, forgetting is the release valve of cognition, the mechanism that lets information flow forward. On a deeper level, forgetting defines the arrow of experience. Memory looks backward. Attention reaches forward. Between them lies a narrow band, the present, constantly renewed by loss. The fact that you cannot relive the past is what makes the future feel open. Every forgotten detail creates the sensation of motion, of leaving something behind. Without erasure, there would be no before or after, only the overwhelming simultaneity of everything. Philosophically, this reshapes the paradox. If remembering stabilizes time, forgetting propels it. Both are expressions of entropy. One accumulates traces, the other disperses them. Together, they generate the rhythm of existence, construction and decay, encoding and release. To forget is to allow the universe to keep becoming itself, and yet, the act of forgetting also guards identity. You are not the sum of everything that has happened to you, but of what remains after forgetting. The boundaries of self are drawn, not by what is stored, but by what is lost. In that sense, death, the ultimate forgetting, is simply the final restoration of equilibrium, the return of organized memory to the timeless field from which it arose. What we call passing time may simply be the mind's way of noticing its own erasures. The arrow of time is the trail left by what we can no longer recall. Humanity extended its mind the moment it began to remember together. Cave paintings, myths, language, writing, each was a device to store memory outside the brain, preserving the past so that others could inhabit it. What began as survival became civilization, a species constructing a collective timeline out of symbols. History, in this light, is not merely a record of time. It is time's replication in shared form. Every culture invents a chronology, a framework that orders chaos into story. Calendars, epochs, religions, and scientific timelines are attempts to synchronize countless subjective flows of memory into one coherent sequence. The illusion of a universal past is thus an emergent property of communication. When individuals exchange memories, they align their internal arrows of time, creating consensus about what came before. That consensus becomes history, a collective pattern of information maintained through ritual, education, and record. But history, like personal memory, is selective. It remembers what serves coherence and forgets what threatens it. Civilizations archive victories and suppress contradictions. Societies preserve certain narratives while erasing others. This collective filtering mirrors the brain's mechanism of forgetting, entropy in cultural form. Over generations, reinterpretation replaces fact, just as neural recall reshapes memory. What survives is not the event itself, but the pattern of meaning it left behind. Technology has only intensified this dynamic. Digital storage gives the illusion of permanence, yet the ocean of data grows so vast that retrieval becomes another kind of forgetting. Algorithms decide what we see, shaping collective memory through invisible curation. Humanity's shared now is thus sculpted by forces that filter reality at planetary scale. The arrow of cultural time follows the same thermodynamic principle as biology. Information flows from order to complexity, from record to myth, from fact to interpretation. The paradox deepens. As our tools preserve more memory than ever before, the lived experience of time accelerates. The more we record, the faster the present dissolves. History expands, but the moment shrinks. Humanity remembers so much that it can no longer keep up with its own remembering. Perhaps the true nature of history is not continuity, but recursion, a species endlessly re-encoding itself to sustain the illusion of forward motion. The world's timeline is a collective dream of persistence, maintained by billions of minds whispering the same phrase, "This happened, and therefore we are." Every piece of the puzzle now points to the same structure. Physics reveals a universe without flow. Thermodynamics gives that stillness an arrow. Biology builds a brain that follows it. And consciousness, confined to local perception, interprets that constraint as time. Each layer of reality adds a translation, from timeless symmetry to statistical direction, from direction to memory, from memory to identity. The illusion of time is not an error. It is the coherent product of the system's architecture. The Bloch universe of relativity describes all events as simultaneous coordinates in space-time. Entropy, however, divides this static landscape into gradients of probability, smoother in the past, disordered in the future. Matter organizes itself along those gradients, forming information structures capable of tracking change. The brain is one such structure, designed by evolution to detect difference. It generates predictions, compares them to outcomes, and adjusts, a continuous computation of deviation. From that process arises the sensation of passage. The brain does not move through time. It measures entropy's increase and calls it now. Consciousness, then, is the interface between timeless physics and entropic information. It experiences sequence because its survival depends on prediction. To live is to anticipate. Every organism must imagine a future to act effectively in the present. The mind's insistence that time flows is not a mistake. It is a necessity. Only by believing in the future can life persist within a universe that already contains it. At the highest scale, memory, identity, and history converge into a single principle: self-reference as survival. The cosmos organizes itself into observers who transform timelessness into experience. Reality observes itself through structures that invent sequence so that awareness can exist at all. Thus, the paradox resolves without vanishing. Time does not exist fundamentally, yet its illusion is the most fundamental experience possible. The universe requires beings who perceive before and after to manifest any notion of meaning. The arrow of time is the shadow cast by consciousness upon eternity. And so, what feels like motion is recognition, what feels like change is pattern, what feels like becoming is the universe realizing itself again and again, from every possible vantage, in perfect stillness. The paradox remains: time does not flow, yet everything moves. We remember the past and anticipate the future, but only because awareness must trace a path through the eternal to know itself. The illusion of time is not a flaw in perception, it is perception's only possible form. Without it, there would be no witness, no memory, no self. The universe would be complete, but blind. Imagine the cosmos as a vast, motionless mural. Every atom, every birth, every death is painted into its place. Nothing changes within the mural, only the light that scans across it. That light is consciousness. As it travels, patterns seem to move, stories unfold, and existence appears to grow. Yet the mural itself never shifts. What we call the future is simply the part of eternity our awareness has not yet illuminated. When you remember, you are not looking backward in time. You are reoccupying a coordinate in the mural that has always existed. When you dream of tomorrow, you are glimpsing another region of the same eternal painting. The flow you feel is the rhythm of your own observation. Time is not what carries you forward. It is what unfolds beneath your gaze. In this realization, the paradox dissolves into clarity. The universe does not need time to exist. Only observers who need time to understand it. Memory gives stillness direction. Forgetting gives it motion. Together they turn eternity into experience. And so, the truth is quietly astonishing. You have never moved through time at all. Time has unfolded within you, one remembered moment at a time, a still universe dreaming itself alive. Write in the comments, I still exist in the version that remembers.